My name is Ken Goodpaster. I'm an emeritus professor of business ethics at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota. I taught for 25 years at St. Thomas before retiring almost 8 years ago. I taught for 10 years at the Harvard Business School before that, and for 10 years at the University of Notre Dame before that. I got my undergraduate degree in mathematics from the University of Notre Dame before going into philosophy at the University of Michigan, and then ended up back at Notre Dame on the faculty in the philosophy department. I was in the business school at St. Thomas, not in the philosophy department. This was a difference. And I was asked which home I wanted. And it was clear to me that the home I wanted and needed to have was the home in the business school, because business ethics needs to transform business education. That was my conviction after all these years. I started in a philosophy department, but philosophy departments are typically in arts and sciences colleges within universities. Business education takes place typically in its own colleges. And I've come to believe that business ethics is needs to be part of the formation of business executives. And MBA programs need to see business ethics as much a part of their educational system as marketing or finance or any other of the core elements of that curriculum. And happily, what's happened at St. Thomas is that we actually have a department now of ethics and business law, right alongside of the marketing department and the management department and the finance department. And in order to get an MBA from St. Thomas, you need to pay your dues to each of the departments as you would for any graduate degree. And but anyone coming into St. Thomas sees that as part of the structure of how you get an MBA here at this place. So this book starts out as my career started out with an insight that comes from Josiah Royce. And I got this passage from Josiah Royce as a gift from my mentor. I never would have come upon it by myself. My mentor was William Frankena at the University of Michigan, a man of great faith and a man of distinguished scholarship, and a dear friend. We were walking across the Michigan campus once, and he said, you should read Josiah Royce. He wrote a book called The Religious Aspect of Philosophy. And in that book, he talks about something called the moral insight. And Ken, you would find that interesting, just knowing you as I do. Well, when Frankena says something like that to you, you go do it. And I went and did it. And lo and behold, this passage on the moral insight just gripped me to the soul. And what Royce says in this passage is that ethics is born, conscience comes to be the moment we discover that there's another person just like me. The discovery of my neighbor, the realization, he uses the word, realization of my neighbor. It's in the book, what I do is I compare it to discovering that there are there are people in the universe on another planet in another galaxy. There's a lovely novel by Mary Doria Russell called The Sparrow. And in this novel, that's the plot, that a discovery is made and that a group of people have to travel to encounter these new rational creatures who have musical talents, and it's just exciting. But the point here is we're not alone. I can see the headline in the New York Times if this discovery was made. We're not alone. There's people out there. But Royce's point is the soul of the person discovers that it's not alone, that there are others that are just as important as oneself. And Royce says this is a delicate, fragile insight. It's not something that is permanent the moment you realize it. It's easy for it to slip away and for you to go back into your little cocoon of self-centeredness. And then you have to break through and realize that the other is just as real as you are. And oh my God, there's more than one. There's a whole lot of others. I'm dramatizing this a little bit, but I want to make the point that this is the birth of conscience. This is where ethics comes from. This is the wellspring of ethics. And unless one understands that this is the birthplace of ethics, all the rest isn't worth it. It's not about rules and laws and all the accoutrement that goes around ethics. It's this wellspring of conscience that the other matters. Now, this is not new. Most philosophers are quite familiar with Plato's Republic. And in Plato's Republic, the strategy is to understand virtue in the soul of the person by analogy with justice in the Republic. And Plato's strategy in the Republic is to try to understand what a just society would look like, with the idea that if the parts of a just society could be understood, maybe there's a corresponding, maybe the corresponding parts of a just society in the soul of an individual could be understood. And Plato's genius was to appreciate how a certain amount of temperance in the life of a society could lead to temperance in the life of an individual. That's a long, long story, but the point I'm trying to make is that his strategy was to look at the macro to understand the micro. My strategy was the reverse. My strategy was to say, well, can't we look at virtue or conscience in the life of an individual and project it to the organization and learn something about what conscience might look like in an organizational setting? Might there be something we could call the institutional insight, analogous to, not identical to, but analogous to the moral insight? Imagine corporate leadership coming to the conclusion that, yes, I have to compete with all intensity with all my competitors, but in a quiet moment, I have to realize something about my position, about my role in society. That this corporation is not alone. That is to say, this corporation is part of a long history of business organizations serving the common good, serving various purposes. It might be transportation. It might be energy. It could be any aspect of the economy. But a wise leader understands that she or he is part of an institutional history and is playing a role that's got a history to it, not just a competitive role in the near term, but a social role in the long term. When we get to the question of passing on business ethics to the next generation, we need to understand moral education. And as I suggested before, I'm a convert to the case method. I really believe that my philosophy of education underwent a revolution when I went from Notre Dame to the Harvard Business School. And the more I got schooled in the case method, the more I believe that the principles of the moral insight, the institutional insight, and the common good all need to be wrapped into the methods that we use to pass on business ethics to the next generation. So I call that the Socratic insight. The Socratic insight is nothing but practicing what we preach. Taking our students seriously, for that matter, taking our children seriously, because the passing on starts in the family, but it moves to the school, and eventually it moves to executive education, right up the ladder. And I've worked at all three of those theaters. I've worked in the family, and I've worked in undergraduate education, and I've worked in graduate education, and I've done a lot of executive education. And in all of those different forums, the critical virtue for the teacher is to be Socratic. And in my opinion, Socratic means respectful of the person wherever they are in their journey, and with an effort to move them further along in their journey, to help them achieve the moral insight if they haven't yet, achieve the institutional insight if they haven't yet, and to have a wide and rich view of what it is for a human being to flourish.